Hello and welcome back to the 6th episode of the Flipwise Podcast. My name is Justin. I'm one of the co-founders of Flipwise. I'm joined by Michael, who's the other co-founder.
Howdy.
We are here to talk about the Flipwise tax report. That is the big feature that we just released on the platform. What was that, a couple days ago? Is that right?
Yeah, that's right. Just on Wednesday.
Yeah, so on January 1st, we hit our deadline. That was our goal that we set probably 2 months prior. We knew we wanted to do some work on our tax reporting functionality, and we knew we wanted to have it ready before the end of the year, and we hit our goal. So I'm very excited that we were able to do that. It's just us two on the team. We don't have a big team of designers and engineers and product managers or anything. It's just us two. And so a lot can come up when we're running a platform like this. It makes it difficult to hit deadlines, but we hit our deadline. So pretty happy.
Yeah, it's pretty exciting.
It really is. And so if you're just joining us, maybe you haven't even seen, maybe you don't even know what Flipwise is. Flipwise is an eBay automation platform that helps you keep good records. It automates a lot of the record keeping process, among other things. And a big part of why you keep records for your eBay business is to be ready for tax time. And historically, Flipwise has made it easy to do your taxes, but not as easy as we knew we could make it. And that was really the goal of this tax reporting project that we worked on and just finished, was to make tax reporting and filing push button easy for your reselling business. Because I've been selling on eBay for 26 years. I know that it's super annoying and difficult to do your taxes for eBay, especially if it's like just a side hustle, and maybe you didn't make a whole, maybe it's not if it's your primary business, you probably have your bookkeeping down. Maybe it's slightly easier, but if it's a side hustle, especially, maybe you're like, oh gosh, what do I do? Where do I get all these numbers? How do I format them in a way that makes sense for the IRS? And that's really what this tax report does, is if you've been diligently logging your costs, your expenses, and your into Flipwise, along with what it automatically ingests for you, you basically go to your tax report, click a button, and it's done. It's there and ready to go. And so it's pretty cool. Pretty cool feature that I'm pretty excited to release.
Yeah, I mean, I guess even before we had the tax report out there, it would have been possible for our users to do their taxes. Like all of the data that they have in Flipwise is exportable. Yeah. And so you theoretically could have exported all the right views from Flipwise and kind of compiled all the different CSVs and done your taxes yourself using that data, or sent those off to your CPA. But we wanted to kind of make it easier than that. You shouldn't have to really sort through all the you accumulate a lot of data if you use Flipwise, and so we didn't want you'd have to sort through all that data yourself and figure out what's important for taxes, what's not important, how do I set up my filters in just the right way. So we really wanted to kind of just make it just push button easy. Here's exactly the set of data you need to file your taxes. If you're missing data, here's the data you need to fill out to make sure your tax return is going to be complete and accurate, et cetera. So I guess that's kind of been the focus here, taking what would have been possible and making it just as easy as possible.
Yeah. And I think that's actually a pretty good, banner for Flipwise in general, is that all the stuff that Flipwise does, is technically possible if you want to use brittle spreadsheets to track all your data and weed through a bunch of annoying exports from eBay and just compile them all together. And it's all possible to do that. And that's how I've done it for many years. But, with Flipwise, we really tried to embrace the idea that let's automate this. Your time is much better spent doing other things in the reselling business besides tracking your data and making sure your tax time or your data is ready for tax time. And so that's sort of how we approach a lot of these projects, is how do we take what may take a dozen steps and 12 hours, how do we condense that down to 30 seconds? And through the power of automation or whatever. And that's really, I think, at the heart of what the tax report is. Maybe we could even rewind a little bit and talk about the path to the tax report, because the tax report itself was I won't say easy project, but it was made much easier because of the work that we had done before, which was really for the income statement. So if you listen to the podcast regularly, our last episode was when we released the income statement. And I'm not going to get into a lot of detail. You can listen to that episode if you'd like. But generally speaking, again, Flipwise was going to give you all of your business performance and report on your sales insights, but it was pretty much exclusive to sales. And so the income that was coming in or going out related to individual orders on eBay or anything you've logged manually for non-eBay marketplaces, our reporting tools were really focused on the sales data. But we knew that our users were logging lots of other expenses that may not be specific to individual orders. And so general business expenses, shipping supplies, all sorts of things. And so the income statement was really meant to collect all of that data that was not necessarily specific to sales, combine it with the sales data, and give you a true profit and loss statement or income statement that was, and that I think this was just an extremely powerful feature for a lot of our users, because all of a sudden they're like, okay, well, I made $5,000 last month in sales, but like, oh, actually, like my net, which I thought was 4,000, actually was like 3,200 because I had all these other expenses that I didn't really consider. And so that was the income statement. I think one of the interesting things about the tax report was around how important purchase dates for your inventory are. And historically, Flipwise just didn't care that much about purchase dates. It was something that the user could define. And in fact, when we run an import for our users, initially when they sign up, we set the purchase date for their active inventory to be the same as the original list date, which isn't always right. We don't always list stuff the day that we purchase it, even though we may want to. But it at least was close. It was an approximation of that. And we allowed people to change it. And for orders that are for sold inventory on that import, we would also do the same thing. But the eBay API has some limitations for orders that are older than 90 days. And so it turns out that our users had, depending on when you sign up, you may have, a backlog of orders that don't have a purchase date. And for us, that was just never that big of a deal because the purchase date was not necessary for Flipwise to function. It was I guess a nice to have, like, hey, if you want to have this data in there, you can. But that's different with the tax report, that we kind of were a little surprised by how important it was for our users to enter in that purchase date when it's not there. You want to give everyone an overview of kind of what we discovered there?
Yeah, I mean, I guess, and again, like thinking about the tax report in terms of like what the kind of experience of using it as a user would be, I think it's kind of unlike a lot of the other stuff we've built over the last year plus working on Flipwise, and that like we're not accountants, we're not CPAs, and so like we knew like what problems we wanted to solve at a high level for our users. We knew we needed to make it push button easy to get all your data to do your taxes, but in terms of the manifestation of what the tax report would actually be to make that possible, we had to figure that out as we went. And, we've talked in the past on past episodes about how we consulted with a CPA and made sure that we were designing this thing in a way such that, if your accountant got this tax report, they'd be delighted to get it because it'd be perfectly organized and in the way that an accountant would need it to be. So anyway, through the course of that process and kind of just designing the income statement, or the tax report rather, it turns out one of the most important sections, one of the most important problems to solve in the tax report is reporting on your cost of goods sold and your inventory. And specifically, I guess there are four numbers that are important. One is what your starting inventory value is, going into January 1 of the tax year, all your inventory on hand, what was the value of that? And then when you close out the year, what was the value of your inventory, your ending inventory? What did you spend on new inventory over the course of the year? And then using those three numbers, the IRS has kind of a cost of goods sold formula where you put those three numbers together to compute, okay, if I start off the year with this much inventory, if I ended the year with this much inventory, and if I spent this much on inventory over the course of the year, therefore my cost of goods sold must be X. Right. And so in order to come up with those first three numbers, obviously you have to know when you purchased each of the items that you put into your inventory and that you may have ultimately sold over the course of the year. So I think before the tax report, we would surface, I think purchase date played a small role. You could see it if you looked at a product. If you went into sales insights, we have total spent on new inventory over that time period, on insights. So there are certain places where we surfaced metrics based on purchase date, but when the tax report came around, it became like critically important, obviously, for all those reasons.
Yeah. And so I think, some people might be surprised when they open up their Flipwise tax report and see that there are missing data. So users may have some users may have been diligently entering in their costs and other acquisition data, but not paying too close of attention to the purchase date. But when they load up their tax report, they may be surprised that there are certain items in their inventory that are missing a purchase date that are required to have to build an accurate tax report. And so that was definitely a surprise to us, kind of just thinking like, okay, well, in retrospect, we probably should have elevated purchase date as sort of a first class piece of acquisition data that we should be alerting folks if it's missing from day one. And in fact, I think we're going to actually go back and change some of the rules with how the missing data warnings on the Flipwise homepage work to include purchase dates in there. So if a purchase date is missing, we'll alert the user in those warnings to go ahead and enter it in. Because today, right now, it doesn't. If a product does not have a purchase date at all, Flipwise does not alert you on the homepage. It only alerts you in the tax report. And we want people to be able to keep up with their data and enter it in over the course of the year instead of being, surprised at the end of the year that all of a sudden this data is important. So that's probably going to be changing as well. And in the near future on Flipwise is making it making purchase date flagged, on the tasks on the homepage. So that's another thing coming.
Yeah.
What else were we surprised with this tax report work? I know that there was a couple of other kind of gotchas or surprises in this that I'm struggling to remember right now.
Well, I guess, I guess on the point about missing data, like one of the things the tax report does, I think it just became clear to us that one of the main functions of the tax report needed to be to tell the user, to kind of like audit the user's data for them and tell them, hey, like you're missing this kind of data and this kind of data, and you need to actually provide that data. Otherwise your tax report won't be accurate. And so, so the tax report has like its own kind of custom set of missing data warnings. And so, surfacing purchase date as a piece of missing data on the tax report became important. But then we also, I guess one of the things we realized is that, man, it's no good if you're warning users about missing data that is not relevant to this tax report. Like
right.
we kind of put this out in beta for our, into production, and we were kind of looking at the tax report for our different users and kind of just seeing what the experience would be for a user who is hitting this tax report for the first time. And we kind of realized that, man, we were just over-warning users about data that's probably not relevant. And so we ended up, and for example, like if you have, we put some rules in place, like if you have a product that has no activity in the tax year, maybe it's something that you listed in 2023 and then unlisted and it's just been sitting in your inventory since then, or maybe you sold it prior to 2024, but you never associated a purchase date with it. We basically came up with a set of rules to filter out things that you probably just don't care about. You may care about it generally for just having complete data in your Flipwise account, and you'll still get warnings about those in other contexts. But in the context of the tax report, we really tried to narrow it down to just warn you only about the data that matters for the tax report. Yeah,
that way you don't spend your time like putting in purchase dates for something 3 years old just so you can do your 2024 taxes, for example. So yeah, that's right. I forgot about that. And the goal was to reduce the number of missing data warnings for our users to be the absolute most critical data, so that you could not spend your time, updating stuff that doesn't necessarily need to be updated. That was definitely a good move. I think, similar to on the income statement, we also, of course, the purpose of the income statement was to kind of bring together sales data and general business expenses, as I said before, but we also had to do the work of handling non-cash expenses. And so from a non-cash perspective, like there's certain expenses you have throughout the year that you don't actually spend money on. So mileage is a good example of that, where, you may write off $5,000 worth of miles, but you're not actually spending $5,000 cash. And so we didn't want that stuff. We wanted you to be able to log it in the ledger because it's important for tax purposes, but we didn't want it to impact your income because it's not actually, you're not paying for it. And so we sort of, as a part of this work too, we built in the functionality to mark expenses as non-cash. And then that way, those could be ignored on the income statement. And then when you view your tax report, they'll show up there. And so that's nice. Like, it was great to see that in practice with the tax report going live as well as just seeing all those non-cash expenses popping up too. So that was another part that we worked on here.
That's true. Another thing that comes to mind, just thinking about the process of building this thing, like just because we were kind of not in our wheelhouse in terms of, we're not accountants. So as we were kind of learning as we went, we had different ideas about how the tax report would function. And like one of the ideas we had early on was like, well, maybe we should ask the user what inventory accounting method they plan to use when they're doing their taxes. Are you using the accrual method for inventory or using the cash method for inventory? And maybe we'd let them choose that, and then we would change the tax report in response to that. But we ultimately just decided that we realized it would be possible, and we just decided it would make more sense to let's be more agnostic about it. Let's not ask the user. Let's not make this thing configurable. It's just give the user. One thing we realized is that we just have all the data in Flipwise to support either method. If you're using Flipwise, if you're keeping your data up to date, then sweet, you can file your taxes however you want because all the data is there. So we just decided to kind of structure the tax report so that no matter what method you decide to use, no matter what method your CPA may decide to use for you, like all the data you need is going to be there, and the tax report can kind of be less opinionated about and have less detail about the specific accounting method that you might ultimately use, which I think ended up being the right choice on that.
I think so. I think that was a really important decision in retrospect because we definitely considered making it configurable, which makes sense. Like, hey, which one do you use? But I think most users don't know. They don't know what they use, and they may just be sending it to their accountant and having their accountant do what they need to do with it, or they may be using software like TurboTax or something. And so, by not requiring the user to configure anything and just sort of displaying everything agnostically on the tax report itself, I think simplified it in a way. But it also meant and I haven't heard this yet. We've gotten no feedback about this yet, which is interesting, but we don't show like a net return or a total taxable income on the tax report itself. Just because with that inventory and COGS values that we show on the tax report, we're not totaling anything up with inventory. We're just showing, starting at inventory value, ending inventory value, how much you spent, and then your cost of goods sold. But nobody's complained about that, and I think that's good. But if we were to force one of those inventory accounting methods, that would technically allow us to then show a sort of total taxable income for the year. But I still think it's a good choice here. I think it really decomplicates and simplifies the tax report for everyone. And that reminds me is that we actually bought TurboTax like back in November or December. So we're like, what do our how are we try to put ourselves in the shoes of our members. What are they going to be doing? So we're like, okay, well, they're probably going to be using, software like TurboTax. So we went and spent $120 or whatever it was and just stepped through the process of doing our taxes as if we were doing our taxes. And then made sure that the tax report was laid out in a way that was friendly to that. And in fact, we just used a lot of the same terms that software like TurboTax uses on it. We called our instead of calling it revenue, we called it business income because, hey, that's what TurboTax uses. Instead of calling it expenses, we called it business expenses, for example, and just sort of tried to make it as simple as possible for the largest group of people. And of course, if you're a CPA receiving the exported documents about this, all of that's going to make sense. But if I really wanted to super serve our members who do their taxes themselves, who may not be sending it to a CPA and just really need to understand it all relatively quickly. And I think aligning it with that tax prep process it was a good way to do that. Although it wasn't fun to spend an afternoon to pretend to do our taxes. That was a little annoying.
Yeah. Yeah. The TurboTax UI is kind of clunky, or looks like old or something. Like felt like we were using like an old like legacy piece of software or something.
The fact that it was like not web based was
right.
also maybe they do have a web based product. I don't know, but it was like an actual like downloadable. Like you had to install it, and then but they basically were displaying an old looking web page in the executable application on your desktop, which I thought was pretty funny.
Yeah. Yeah. But I guess I guess this kind of clicked for us partway through this process. Like whenever you as a reseller do your taxes, you use a CPA. Like you always just like send off all your stuff to your CPA and trust them to get it right. And so we had to kind of get up to speed a bit on that's one experience. One experience is your user uses a CPA, and then the other kind of scenario we had to address is like, okay, you don't use a CPA, you're doing it yourself. And so that was kind of part of that TurboTax exercise. It's like, okay, let's pretend that we're not using a CPA. What is this experience going to be like of using this tax report?
Yeah. Yeah. And so I think if you're doing your own taxes, I feel pretty good that what you're going to get from Flipwise is pretty clear, especially if you happen to be using TurboTax, because we specifically aligned it with that one, although it's universal, it's not custom built for TurboTax by any means. It will work with anything, but I think if you are using TurboTax, it's probably a tad easier. But we definitely did want to serve that member who's doing their own taxes, but also in working with a CPA to help us design this, like the kind of how we framed it to Mark, the CPA that we worked with here, was we're like, hey, we want your help building something that's so good that you wished all your clients used it. Not because we were like trying to get clients from them, but just because we wanted to build something that a CPA wanted as well. Like what questions do you ask your reselling clients when they're doing their taxes? What most commonly do they leave out? We just asked them all these different questions, and that was the sort of basis for what we built. And then we built like an early version of it and got on a call with him and be like, hey, pretend this is what you got. And he would give us a bunch of feedback and we would iterate on that until we ended up with a solution here that felt very easy to use for an individual who's going to file their taxes using software like TurboTax, and a sort of detailed version of that a CPA is going to find easy to use, and it's going to answer all their questions. Because we said like, hey, like one of the pain points that Mark had said, if I'm remembering correctly, was like, well, often I have to like a lot of back and forth, like, hey, what is this? What what did you mean by this? That type of thing. And so like we really tried to build something that minimized the back and forth between you and a CPA. And I really think that we've achieved that there. I feel like Mark really liked what we built. So I think it's going to end up being pretty good for our members.
Yeah, and one of the things we did in that category of stuff is, and we kind of made this decision with the income statement first, but like we just decided we're going to give you all the data you could possibly want.
Yeah.
Like not irrelevant data, not data from a different tax year, but like all the data specific to the tax year that you could possibly want, and we're going to make it just very easy for you to kind of click a button and download your tax reports and all that data all at once in a single kind of single friendly package. And so yeah, hopefully that helps minimize the back and forth, because you download this tax report, you can look at the data yourself. Maybe you don't look at any of the data. Maybe you just send it straight onto your CPA, but they're going to be able to see not just the kind of high level numbers from the tax report, but they'll be able to see all the sales you made and all this, all the details for them, all the marketplace fees you were charged, refunds you made, things you donated. I think there's like 11 different CSVs that kind of they're related to the tax report. And so really, like, if your accountant is curious about how did the tax report arrive at this number, all the data is right there. And then we also have a help page that kind of explains for every single number on the tax report how you can look at the raw data and kind of understand how the raw data relates to the numbers on the tax report. So really, like, if you're interested as a user and seeing all that data yourself and understanding those things, or if your accountant wants to understand that, it's all right there. It's documented, and hopefully it's easy to sort through and figure it out.
Yeah. And we've, it's been live for it's only 2 days ago. Man, that's crazy. It's January 3rd. It went live on the 1st, but we're already getting some good feedback. And we've gotten this feedback 3 or 4 times now, which is really interesting and not something that I anticipated in any way whatsoever, which just highlights the value of having such a strong relationship with our members, is that we can quickly assess feedback and implement solutions there. But so far, the most feedback we've gotten, or the most recurring feedback that we've gotten, is that when folks load up the tax report, I think that it gives them a feeling of completeness, like what they're looking at is set in stone or locked. When the reality is the tax report is like a living, dynamic page that is constantly updating. And so we've gotten questions like, oh, hey, I haven't entered in my expenses yet for the year. Do I need to regenerate a report or something like that? And the answer to that is no, is it's always updating. If you make any changes at any time that's relevant to the tax year that you're looking at for the report, the tax report will update automatically, instantly, which, when people learn that, like, okay, great, that's awesome. And so I think we're just trying to figure out, how do we solve for that? How do we elegantly tell the user that, or imply to the user that what they're looking at is not a fixed report, but in fact a dynamic, constantly updating report. And we're just bouncing a bunch of ideas back on how we could go about doing that. And I don't know if we've landed on a solution yet, but just some sort of little badge or little icon or something that's live updating, or something that just tells the user oh, okay, this is not set in stone. This is not going to, I don't need to regenerate anything. It's just, I was not anticipating that feedback at all.
Yeah, right. Yeah, me either. And I guess it does kind of make sense when you think about it. I think you kind of expect as a human doing things on the internet that at the start of the year, you get all these tax documents from your bank and your mortgage company or any other place you need a tax document from. And it's usually just a static PDF that's generated once. And so it kind of makes sense that people assume that the Flipwise tax report is the same. But it's not, because we assume that, okay, when you generate your tax report, basically all the users are going to have some kind of cleanup work to do on their data to get it ready. And so it's just designed to be live updating to accommodate that workflow. Yeah.
And so we just need to somehow tell the user that, in a friendly way. And so we'll implement something there. Not quite sure what yet, but we'll figure that out and get it out there soon, so people know that their changes are going to be live.
Yeah.
Well, I don't know about you, but I'm glad to be done working on the tax report and the income statement. It's very important work that's going to be just a huge value add for our members. But I'm glad to be focusing on something else now.
Yeah, no, me too, for sure. It was a very challenging sequence of work, and we've really been working on, again, going back to March and all the kind of dependent projects. Been working on this for half the time we've been open for business, which seems kind of crazy. So yeah, I think we're both, just as people making the product, excited about focusing on something new. But I think there's just so much fun stuff we have planned for our users. Taxes is necessary. People are going to be happy they have this, but there's going to be things that are more exciting that we'll get to start turning focus to on here in the next few months.
Yeah, it's interesting. There, part of the vision, the grand vision, for Flipwise is not just about managing the bookkeeping of your business in an automated way. That's an important thing, and it frees you up to do all sorts of other things since you don't have to do much bookkeeping. But what we haven't addressed yet in any way whatsoever is increasing sales. That's, to me, that's almost more important, and there's just so much that we can do through automation to, help the user sell more. That make more money. That's, and I'm so eager to dig into that work, which I think we're finally at a point where we're going to be doing that pretty soon. We're just starting to add functionality that makes it easier to list, that makes it easier to automate all these different actions that you have to take manually today to sort of stoke your sales and keep them going and increase them. And sort of, take a lot of what I preach on the YouTube channel and productize it, and turn it into automation and products. There's just, that's when I think I just can't wait to start doing that, because then that's just icing on the cake. I think, our members already really like using Flipwise, and, soon we're not just going to make it easy to do taxes and keep your books, but we're going to actually increase your sales for you. And so I'm just super excited to dig into that. And I think, right now we pretty quickly switched gears after launching the tax report just a few days ago into adding unlisted inventory into Flipwise. I think we're going to open up the beta for that pretty soon so that we can start to work with our members on that. But we've kind of, maybe we can talk a little bit about what we think we're going to build there. We have a pretty good idea of what we're going to build. And it really is kind of two components to adding unlisted inventory. The first component is actually adding unlisted inventory to Flipwise, which is the more simple part of it. As you might imagine, it's, relatively straightforward to give our members the tools that they need to go to Flipwise and add, their death pile to Flipwise and assign the acquisition data to it. Or when they go to a thrift store and come home, they want to log that stuff immediately instead of having to wait until it's listed on eBay. So all of that is like pretty straightforward. And that's kind of the part that we're focused on right now. The second half is much more difficult. And that is, well, what happens when it's eventually listed? How do we connect the two? And that's the second part of unlisted. And, long term, we want to make that sort of like connection happen automatically because Flipwise has a lot of data, both about the listing and about the unlisted part of it. And we can make some assumptions about that data and in the vast majority of cases sort of automatically connect those two. But that it's difficult to do that type of thing right 100% of the time. And so I think to begin with, and especially for this first approach for adding unlisted inventory to Flipwise, we're going to make it easy to add, whether you're adding one item to your inventory or whether you're adding 100 items to your inventory. We're going to make it easy for you to do that, especially when it comes to like duplicating acquisition data. Like we realize that most of our members, they don't rarely buy one thing at a time. They're usually buying many things at a time from the same place on the same date. There's acquisition data that's the same across many items. And so, we need to build a solution that makes it easy to add lots of things at one time that shares a lot of the same data. And so that's kind of the focus now. And I think we're going to try to get that stood up and get some people in there using it while we're also then working on that sort of connection function. Does that sound right?
No, that all sounds right. Yeah. Yeah, that was the main kind of special requirement or thing we wanted to make sure was true about the kind of process of adding, that you could just rapid fire add stuff really, really efficiently and share acquisition data, as you mentioned. So I think we have we tossed around a whole bunch of different ideas. I think we've landed on something that, is pretty simple, but I think will be effective. And and I guess, one of the reasons we're focused on this is because our users want it really badly. We get asked about it a lot. But another reason is it may be important for your taxes for 2024 to have your unlisted inventory kind of represented, depending on how you do your tax return and how much is in your death pile. So we always want to make sure that functionality is out as soon as possible, so folks can get their unlisted inventory into Flipwise before they do their taxes if they want to do that. But then like the connect piece is something we want to just to be thoughtful in how we design, because you may be looking at a product in your unlisted inventory and you kind of connect starting at that starting point, or you may be looking at something you just listed and you want to connect back to an unlisted product. And so we want to kind of just make a really easy, friendly UI that kind of makes sense and it doesn't like bog down Flipwise, doesn't make it feel too complicated. And if a lot of people don't enter unlisted inventory, they have no desire to. And so for those users, nothing will change. So we just want to kind of think through all the details to make sure it's as easy as possible for what could be seen as like a complex kind of a thing you're doing. Connecting these two things, kind of merging two products together, that sort of thing.
Yeah, and it really like highlights a challenge that we face very regularly and will continue to face and will probably face to a greater degree as time goes on, which is like, how do we add functionality to Flipwise without increasing the complexity, which is like, I don't know, when I say it out loud, like impossible, like what comes with added functionality is increased complexity. But our goal is to reduce that complexity and make it as simple as possible. And just, I think that we do that in ways that you just described, which is to like think about, only adjust the experience when necessary. If a user hasn't added any unlisted inventory, don't show them any of the tools to connect, that would just be confusing to them. So it's just a constant struggle, and part of the beauty of Flipwise today is how simple it is to use. And I'm almost like in some ways like reluctant to add functionality because I don't want to make it more complex, but obviously we want to add a lot more functionality. So it's definitely like this push and pull that we face all the time of keeping it simple without adding a bunch of complexity.
Yep, absolutely.
It's tough. So yeah, that's what we're working on now. Unlisted inventory, getting allowing people to add it and making sure that they can connect it to their listings once they're live. And then, bulk editing is the other one. We really went back and forth like, hey, do we follow the tax report with bulk editing, or do we jump into unlisted inventory? We ultimately decided unlisted inventory because of that tax reason. So depending on how you do your taxes, it could be that unlisted inventory values are important to you. For most people, they're not, but for some people they are. Most people, I think, use their cost of goods sold, meaning it would have to be listed in the first place. And so that's, what Flipwise has today is good enough for you. But there are folks that use an inventory accounting method that requires that they have their unlisted inventory values as well. And just right now that you can't do that. And so we're like, okay, let's fix that. So as quickly as possible, get that unlisted inventory functionality in there. But then I think we're going to turn our attention to bulk editing, because that's another pain point today in Flipwise, is that if you need to make lots of changes, or you need to make changes to lots of records at one time, you can't do it. And we realize that's a limitation for sure. It's a limitation for me too, as a Flipwise user as well. And so I'm eager to get that up and running as well, because it'll also help for tax time too, because sometimes some people are going to be faced with some warnings on their tax results that says like 100 products are missing X. And, right now you're going to have to go through and update those one at a time, where a bulk editing feature might allow you to cut that time in half, for example. So,
yep.
Well, that's it. That's what we're working on. Gosh, there's always something on the horizon, but it's like I said earlier, I'm so excited to think about new things and bring some much needed functionality to Flipwise. Unlisted inventory, we get asked about every single day, so I can't wait to get that up and out there.
Other than the stuff we just talked about, like bulk editing, unlisted, and then the kind of general category of helping our users increase their sales, are there other things you're excited about for this year? Like as a reseller who uses Flipwise, is there like one other thing you just really wish Flipwise could do for you?
Yeah, for sure. I think, definitely in the category of helping to increase sales, that is a big bucket there through automation. I just really think like some of the rule systems that we've been talking about through automation of just automated ending and relisting, for example, would just be kind of a no-brainer to have that in Flipwise. But there's so much more automation that we can do there that is going to be really powerful. Like, for example, automation around offers. That's something I'm very excited about, where right now, like every day or so, I pop into eBay and I look and see what products have offers on it, or allow me to send offers on it, and I'll send those offers out. Sometimes I forget all that. And I think eBay is like toying with some automation there as well. But the automation that I know that we can do is going to be really powerful. Like, here's a scenario that I want to solve in some of our automation to work on this year is like, have a rule in Flipwise that says like, if you get an offer on a product that is, within 10% of what you want on it, and it's been listed for more than 30 days, automatically accept it or something. Or if someone watches a product of yours, if someone watches a listing of yours on eBay, and it's been listed for more than 2 weeks, then send out an offer for 10%. If it's been listed for more than 4 weeks, send out an offer for 20%. I'm just making this up right now, but there's so much that we can do to sort of fine tune the offer sending and receiving mechanisms that will allow to take advantage of sales when they're there. Because if someone watches an item, you want to act on that as quickly as you can. So Flipwise can know when an item's been watched, and in turn it can go back and send a predefined offer back out to that watcher. Like, that's part of the rule too. Like, wait 10 minutes, wait 1 minute. I don't know. We haven't dug into any at all, but all sorts of automation around listing, around offers, pricing, things like that, I think are just going to be really powerful. Beyond that, like goal setting, I'm really excited about building sort of kind of gamification type things into Flipwise. I encourage folks to list every single day. It would be great to have it's like kind of like if you use Duolingo. I know my kids are using Duolingo all the time to learn Spanish, and they just I hear them talk with their friends about their streak, like keeping their daily streak of using Duolingo alive. Somehow Duolingo has turned that into like a cultural thing about sort of keeping a daily streak alive. I'd love to have like that sort of like sentiment built into Flipwise as well, of just like, hey, how what is your streak for having new listings on eBay, and having that a part that's something you celebrate and share, I think would be really cool. So stuff like that, I just can't wait to dig into.
Yeah, that's awesome. Yeah, it kind of just puts into the software all the kind of, like on your YouTube channel, you talk a lot about so much of the challenges around like motivation and discipline and just like, putting the time in and putting the time in every day. And so to the extent that we can just help people kind of like codify those best practices into the software and help encourage people to do the things that need to be done, make it fun. That's really exciting to think about.
Yeah. I mean, just like, I'll just use my example, myself as an example, where I want to list 5 things a day. And so I want to be able to go into Flipwise and it say, hey, what's your listing goal for the year? And I'm going to say 5 things a day. And then we can be tracking your progress towards that goal on a daily, weekly, monthly basis. We can be creating, new tasks on your dashboard that says, hey, list 7 things today to keep you on track or whatever. And so there's just so much stuff that we can do in there. But, some people don't keep listing goals. They keep like revenue goals. They want to list a certain amount, like a certain list value every day, like whether that's, one listing worth $100 or 10 listings worth $10, that's important to them. Or some people only care about sales goals. And so there's just so much stuff we can do there that is going to enhance that experience and make it more fun and tangible for our members.
Yeah, that's cool. And kind of would go along with that well as something else we've talked about, which is the ability to kind of easily share stuff that's happening in Flipwise out with on Instagram or Reddit or with in your group chat with your friends. Like we see that a lot in Discord. People just take screenshots of sales they've made in Flipwise and drop them into Discord.
Yeah.
But making it easier to kind of share those wins out of Flipwise in whatever kind of social platform you're on, that's gonna be cool too.
It's funny because it's really difficult to get a screenshot on Flipwise that like shows all the information that you want to show. So you actually see people listing like two screenshots because like they want to have the picture in there and the name of the item, but then you can't see like what it sold for in the, or I can't remember exactly, but like, maybe we should be also rethinking like our web UI to show all of the relevant data in some way so that it's easy to take a screenshot without having to like resize your browser or do something weird like that.
Yeah.
All right. Well, we're at 46 minutes here. I think we can wrap it up. Excited to turn the corner into 2025 and work on some new stuff. Hopefully, I'm really so excited to have that tax report out for folks in time. 1099s for eBay will go out here in a few weeks, and hopefully our members are going to have everything that they need. So pretty exciting.
Yeah, pretty sweet.
All right. We'll see y'all next time. Thank you.